History is filled with mysteries, lost cities, forgotten civilizations, ships that vanished without a trace. But sometimes, the greatest mysteries begin inside a palace, behind stone walls, locked doors, and royal secrets. Our story takes us to England in the year 1483. The nation had only recently emerged from decades of civil war. The Wars of the Roses had divided the kingdom. Families fought families. Brothers fought brothers. Thousands lost their lives in a struggle for the English crown. When King Edward IV finally secured the throne, many believed peace had finally arrived. He ruled England for more than 20 years, strong, confident, and respected by many of his subjects. But in April of 1483, everything changed. King Edward IV died unexpectedly. He was only 40 years old. His death shocked the kingdom. More importantly, it left the throne to his 12-year-old son. The young prince would become King Edward V. At least, that was the plan. Because England had a problem. A child could not easily rule a kingdom filled with ambitious nobles. Someone needed to protect the young king until he came of age. That responsibility fell to his uncle, Richard, Duke of Gloucester, a skilled military commander, a trusted brother of the late king. At first, his appointment seemed reasonable. No one imagined what would happen next. Young Edward began traveling toward London for his coronation. The journey should have been a celebration. Instead, it became the beginning of one of history's darkest mysteries. Richard met the young king on the road. He welcomed his nephew warmly. But within days, Edward's closest supporters were arrested. Some were accused of treason. Others were executed. The political landscape changed almost overnight. Richard assumed complete control of the royal household. The young king continued toward London, but now he traveled under his uncle's authority. Soon, Edward reached one of England's most famous buildings, the Tower of London. Today, it is known as a historic landmark, but in the 15th century, it served many purposes: a royal residence, a fortress, a prison, and the traditional place where monarchs stayed before their coronation. To the public, there was nothing unusual about the young king entering the tower. Future kings had done so before. Preparations for the coronation appeared to continue. Soon afterward, Edward's younger brother, Richard, Duke of York, joined him inside the tower. The two princes were finally together again. The kingdom expected to see them crowned. Instead, they would slowly disappear from history. Meanwhile, Richard of Gloucester continued consolidating power. Questions began circulating throughout England. Were the two princes truly legitimate heirs? Or had their parents' marriage been invalid? If the marriage itself had been unlawful, then the children could not legally inherit the throne. The argument shocked the kingdom. A sermon delivered in London publicly challenged the legitimacy of Edward IV's children. Soon afterward, Parliament accepted the claim. Edward V was no longer recognized as the rightful king. The crown now passed to his uncle. Richard of Gloucester became King Richard III. The coronation took place. England had a new king. But what about the two boys? Officially, they remained inside the tower. At first, they were occasionally seen playing in the gardens, looking through the windows, walking together within the castle walls. Then, the sightings became less frequent. Days passed. Weeks passed. Eventually, they disappeared completely. No official announcement was made. No funeral. No explanation. The future King of England and his younger brother had simply vanished. At first, many hoped they had been quietly moved to another royal residence. Others believed they were being protected from political enemies. But as the months turned into years, those hopes began to fade. Across England, people whispered the same terrifying question. What had happened to the princes in the Tower? As the summer of 1483 came to an end, the Tower of London grew quieter. Servants who had once seen the young princes playing in the courtyards began noticing something unusual. The boys were no longer appearing at the windows. No laughter echoed through the stone corridors. No footsteps could be heard in the gardens. The future King of England and his younger brother had seemingly vanished from public view. At first, few people dared to ask questions. King Richard III had only recently taken the throne. England remained politically unstable. Speaking against the king could be dangerous. Many nobles chose silence. Others quietly left London. Yet rumors spread faster than official announcements. Some believed the princes were being hidden for their own protection. Supporters of the former royal family might attempt a rescue. Keeping the boys inside the tower seemed, at least publicly, like a reasonable precaution. But weeks turned into months. Still, no one outside the royal household saw the princes again. Foreign diplomats began writing letters back to Europe. Several reported that the boys had disappeared from public life. Merchants arriving in London heard the same whispers in crowded taverns. "Has anyone seen the princes?" No one had. One Italian visitor wrote that many people already believed the boys were dead. But belief is not proof. No bodies were shown. No official statement was issued. No witnesses came forward claiming to have seen the final moments. The silence became almost unbearable. Among the many stories that emerged, one name appeared again and again: King Richard III. As the new ruler, he clearly benefited from the prince's disappearance. If Edward V and his brother were alive, they would always remain a threat to his claim to the throne. Every rebellion, every conspiracy, every dissatisfied noble could rally around the young king. Removing them from the political stage solved that problem. For this reason, many historians have long considered Richard III the primary suspect. Yet history is rarely so straightforward. There is no surviving royal order demanding the deaths of the princes, no confession, no contemporary document proving that Richard gave such a command. Everything rests on suspicion, motive, and circumstance. Other names have also entered the story. Some historians point toward Henry Tudor, the man who would later become King Henry VII. After defeating Richard III at the Battle of Bosworth in 1485, Henry married the prince's sister, Elizabeth of York. This united the rival royal families and strengthened his own claim to the throne. If the princes were still alive, Henry's position as king would have been far less secure. Could they have survived Richard's reign, only to disappear later? The evidence offers no clear answer. Another theory focuses on Henry Stafford, Duke of Buckingham, one of Richard III's most powerful allies. Buckingham possessed ambition, wealth, and influence. Some researchers believe he may have acted independently, hoping to strengthen Richard's position or even his own. Again, there is no definitive proof, only possibilities. Centuries later, the mystery remains because every theory explains part of the story, but none explains all of it. Meanwhile, the tower itself became part of the legend. Its stone walls witnessed countless imprisonments, political betrayals, royal executions. For generations, people walked past its gates wondering whether the two young princes had spent their final days somewhere inside. The absence of evidence only deepened the mystery. Sometimes, history leaves behind documents. Sometimes, it leaves behind ruins. And sometimes, it leaves behind only questions. By the end of the 15th century, the princes in the tower had already become one of England's greatest unsolved mysteries. A mystery that would endure for more than 500 years. For nearly 2 centuries, the mystery remained untouched. Kings came and went. Wars were fought. England changed forever. Yet no one knew what had become of the 2 young princes. Then, in the summer of 1674, workers renovating the Tower of London made a remarkable discovery. While removing part of an old staircase, they uncovered a small wooden chest buried beneath the stone. Inside were the skeletal remains of 2 children. The discovery immediately captured public attention. Many believed the mystery had finally been solved. King Charles II ordered the remains to be placed with honor inside Westminster Abbey. They were buried as the possible princes in the tower. But there was one problem. No one could prove the skeletons truly belonged to Edward V and Richard of Shrewsbury. Centuries later, scientists examined the remains using the best methods available at the time. The bones appeared consistent with children of a similar age, yet the evidence was far from conclusive. Modern DNA analysis could potentially provide stronger answers. However, the remains have never been fully tested using today's most advanced genetic techniques. Permission to conduct further analysis has remained a matter of debate. As a result, the greatest question still survives. Were those truly the missing princes? Or were they 2 completely different children whose identities have also been lost to history? Historians continue to examine every surviving letter, every royal record, and every contemporary account. Most agree on one point. The princes almost certainly never left the tower alive. Beyond that, certainty disappears. Some researchers believe Richard III ordered their deaths. Others argue there is simply not enough evidence to reach that conclusion. A smaller number continue to suspect later political rivals. History offers possibilities, not certainty. Perhaps that uncertainty is exactly why this mystery has endured for more than 500 years. It reminds us that power often leaves behind incomplete records. The people who write history are not always the people who know the truth. Sometimes, the most important answers disappear with those who witnessed them. The princes in the tower were never soldiers. They never ruled a kingdom. They never commanded an army. They were simply 2 boys born into one of the most dangerous families in Europe. Their lives became part of a struggle they were far too young to understand. Their disappearance changed the course of English history. Richard III's reputation was forever shaped by suspicion. Henry VII founded a new royal dynasty. The Wars of the Roses finally came to an end. Yet beneath all those political changes, one mystery remained untouched. What really happened inside the tower? Perhaps the answer still rests somewhere beneath centuries of stone. Perhaps an overlooked document waits inside a forgotten archive. Or perhaps the final truth disappeared with the last person who knew it. History often remembers the winners, but sometimes its greatest mysteries belong to those who never had the chance to tell their own story. The princes in the tower left behind no final words, no farewell, no explanation, only silence. And after more than 500 years, that silence continues to echo through the halls of the Tower of London. As visitors walk through its ancient gates today, they see walls that have witnessed triumph, betrayal, and tragedy. Some come searching for history, others come searching for answers. Yet everyone leaves with the same question: what happened to the two princes? Perhaps one day, new technology, new evidence, or a forgotten manuscript will finally reveal the truth. Until then, their story remains one of history's greatest mysteries, not because we know nothing, but because we know just enough to keep asking.